Hello, everyone. So now we have hit 200 subscribers on this channel. So for this 200 subscriber special, I wanted to do something a bit interesting. I thought I'd cover every single reference I found in Season 7 of classic series Thomas and Friends. I used to be obsessed with this season, but not really anymore. And even though I'm not obsessed with it anymore, my friends still like to joke about it. But I used to hate that joke. It would always annoy me every now and then. But I'm not actually annoyed by it anymore. I found it actually kind of a funny joke. But anyways, I'm getting off topic here. So before we get started, let's put in some rules first. Number 1, music. I'm sorry to say, but the music will not count as reference, because even though they try to use every single cue that they can think of, I'm still not counting it because, well, most of them are just hard to tell. But lots I can actually remember. Like, the Scarlet Railway theme is used a bunch of times in this season, instead of just like 3 or 4 standard times. Well, maybe I'm wrong about that. But let's go into rule number 2. Number 2, episodes. We will go through all the references by the Season 7 episodes, because if we did Seasons 1 through 6, we'd be here all day. Obviously. Number 3, point-outs. There are some cases where these previous episodes from the previous 6 seasons are referenced twice, and that's pretty much fine with me. If an episode's referenced twice, that won't make much of a difference. So, yeah. Anyways, let's get started into our big, long video of full references found in this season. We'll be running off the bat with Emily's new coaches, and right away, there are a couple of references, but not a lot. In this scene where Emily is passing Sodor Station, she says hello to Thomas, but Thomas notices that Emily has his coaches. And right away, I can see this callback. Thomas's jealousy is a callback to Thomas and Stepney, the first episode of the Stepney arc. And to be honest, that's really a big surprise, considering we haven't seen Thomas this jealous before. And really, I like that. Another few references can be found in this scene where Emily encounters Oliver on a crossing broken down. And so I feel this is a big callback too, as we see Oliver being terrified for his life when he is about to be run over by Thomas. Emily shoves Oliver out of the way so that Thomas can pass through without stopping. That, I feel, is a callback to the Season 3 episode, Escape. You know, the episode where Douglas rescues Oliver from Scrap? Yeah, it's the same case here. I feel this is also a callback to the Jack and the Pack arc pilot episodes. Because, well, Thomas is put in a dangerous situation, and Jack tries to save him. That's pretty much what happens here. And yeah, well, that's all the references I can find in Emily's New Coaches. So let's keep going. And right away, the next episode has a lot of references. Up to 17 to 18 references. Wow, that's a lot. But yeah, Percy gets it right is the clear winner for total amount of references, in my eyes. So Percy experiencing a big bump is a callback to Thomas gets bumped, and which is a surprise for him, considering it's also a callback to a surprise to Percy from Season 5. I swear to God, why is Percy so in character in this season? Wasn't he out of character in Season 6? I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's a really good thing, but I'm just very surprised. And this scene where Gordon and Percy are talking to each other reminds me of By George from Season 5 as well. And Percy tries to tell the Fat Controller about the wobbly track, but Sir Topham Hatt doesn't listen for some reason. Oh wait, just because we need the story to happen. Right. Yeah, this is a definite callback to middle engine, of course. And it feels very Percy takes the plunge, considering of how many times Sir Tom has disciplined Percy. It's kind of clear that he would not believe him, but kind of stupid at the same time, really. But there's still lots more we need to cover. After Thomas collects the bull, he sets off through the rain, but unaware of the avalanche ahead, which knocks over the red flags, in which the crash is shot at a horrible angle. It's almost off screen. But this is a definite callback to the Fogman as well, so I guess that makes sense. And also this scene where Percy is worried about Thomas, but the big engines aren't. Well, it looks like it kind of feels like the 2 episodes from season 1. You know, Tenders and Turntables and Trouble in the Shed. They actually very much remind me of that. Although they say very pointless dialogue that isn't needed. Percy then gets permission to go out and look for Thomas, and I can see his I can see his fear because, well, I guess it would be also a callback to Percy in the Haunted Mine, where I guess he was scared of the dark or something. I'm not sure. And it's also a callback to Happy Ever After, for where when Percy is trying to look for Thomas, he was actually doing the same thing in Season 5. He was trying to look for something blue, and Thomas is the blue engine. So, I guess that makes sense. And their dynamic also reminds me of Thomas, Percy, and the Coal too. In which, that's really nice. And forgive me if I bend my own rules a bit. The intro the theme at the beginning actually is from a season 6 episode, Percy's Chocolate Crunch. A cue from this will be used later, in like only 2 episodes later. But yeah, and also Percy pulling tomatoes is a callback to Percy, James and the Fruitful Day, I guess? I don't know. But it'll be called back later. And it also kind of reminds me of Percy's Chocolate Crunch as well, surprisingly. And Percy helping out Thomas is also a callback to Thomas Percy in the Post Train, where Thomas helped a poor man home. Or take him to his home anyway. This story feels like an episode from season 2, as when Thomas comes back, he actually looks like a woolly bear. Get it? Get the joke? Yeah, that was an awful pun, I get it. This story also kind of feels like Mind That Bike too, as I feel Percy's surprising bump actually kind of reminds me of his surprise when he breaks the bike, and it's surprising because the driver realizes the earth's crumbling, so Percy has been rolling over a set of broken tracks. That's a bit funny to think about. I feel the crash also kind of reminds me of Put Upon Percy, and rightfully so, as Thomas is the one getting buried inside the avalanche. Okay, that was a lot of references. But I will admit the other episodes won't be as chunky as this one. Let's keep going. Good old Bill, Ben, and Fergus. Now for the remainder of the video, we will be using only Season 7 footage, because I am getting tired of using old footage from Seasons 1 through 6. So let's just keep going. I know I've said that like 1,000 times already, but we're just gonna try and go through this as fast as we can, without missing anything. And right away, after the scene where Thomas talks to Fergus, we get our first reference. And it is the episode Mavis, where Mavis tells Fergus to sort out the trucks, kind of like how Toby did back in Season 3, when Toby told Mavis to do that. And now Mavis is doing the exact same thing with Fergus, the new engine on Sodor. But it's implied that Fergus has been around for a long time. But yeah, still, he's a new character in terms of appearances. Another few references occur, but this time it's an entire Season 4 arc. Fergus tells Bill and Ben what to do by saying, "Do it right." The famous quote that everyone can quote word for word. I guess, maybe. And it's pretty much became an overused meme at this point, I think. In which the entire Season 4 arc is, well, the mid-Sodor episodes. Yes, I'm talking about all 4 of them. And one of them will be referenced directly in the next episode. And Bill and Ben treat Fergus like garbage like they have with several other engines like Boko, Salty, Derek, etc. Them pushing the Rock Crusher together is a callback to One Good Turn from Season 3, where they pulled a goods train together and worked out their differences. And apparently, the working out differences seem to have stuck currently now. This would also count to Buffer Bother as well. And once again, we see Bill and Ben at a rock slide. Like the last time we've seen them at a rock slide was like Season 3 or something. Jeez, how time passes by. And that's all the callbacks to Bill, Ben, and Fergus. Now, let's go on to the next one, which is the old bridge. Ah, yes, the old bridge. Probably almost everyone's least favorite episode. Well, it's not my least favorite episode. Okay, let's just get into it. Skarloey nearly falling off the bridge is a callback to Toby's tightrope and Bulldog, surprisingly, I guess. Because, well, Skarloey, the bridge actually took damage, of course. Skarloey tries to cross the bridge, but then, guess what? He refuses to cross it. Which I feel he's doing the opposite of what he did back in Four Little Engines in Season 4. How ridiculous this gets. But I really like how he wants to go above and beyond to rescue his friend. Rheneas is stuck on a bridge, and Skarloey goes above and beyond to rescue his friend. Well, I know I've said that, but come on, I had no idea what else to say. And the plot is also kind of similar to Haunted Henry in some cases. Like, Skarloey goes on the bridge a first time, he doesn't want to. Just like Henry didn't want to pass the station. And Skarloey goes on the bridge a second time to rescue Rheneas, which by the way is a callback to Home at Last, when Skarloey wants to go above and beyond to help out an engine he doesn't know. And yeah, so once Skarloey goes on the bridge a second time, he actually goes over it, and his fear is conquered. To me now, the message is really great and all, but it's still a pretty bad episode. In what is meant to be a great Skarloey and Rheneas duo episode. But who knows? This endangerment might have given Skarloey some scary flashbacks. Maybe his worst flashback is when he was almost crushed by Boulder. That might be a callback. And right off the bat, we do get a reference in Edward's brass band, where Thomas has a conversation and teases Edward, just like he did back in Season 2's Saved from Scrap. And it kind of feels like old iron, considering that Thomas still respects Edward to this day. I mean, like, yes, he still does respect Edward to this day. He's been respecting him for many years, obviously. And maybe the storm at night could have given Edward his exploit flashbacks. That might also be a callback. After Birdie's theme comes back once again, we see Birdie getting stuck in the mud, like he did back in Season 3's Edward, Trevor, and the Real Useful Party. Now, what's funny about this is that this episode, like Bulldog, is going to be referenced in a later episode. And that's another really surprising fact, considering that mainly, an episode should be referenced only once, but I don't mind it being referenced twice. And let me just say, this feels like a straight-up Birdie's Chase episode, because, well, the Edward and Birdie dynamic is back. And it does feel like Thomas, Percy, and the Squeak as well, because, well, there is a concert going on at the same location, so I guess we can count that too. Now, What's the Matter with Henry sadly is a downgrade, but there is some callbacks to it, because it does give me Season 1 vibes, well, mainly because of Henry being ill again. Like, you know, from the episodes Thomas and the Guard, Thomas's Train, Cole, the Flying Kipper, I guess, with his new rebuild, and yeah. And I am factually surprised to find out that this episode only references Season 6, about 6 or 7 Season 1 episodes. I think I explained like maybe 3 or 4, and the other 3 are The Sad Story of Henry, Edward Gordon and Henry, and Whistles and Sneezes. Because, well, it does have a little bit of a sad tone to it. Well, yeah, some people who say that Season 7 is similar in tone, I like the tone a lot in this episode. It does feel a bit sad towards the middle, but it sometimes can be upbeat and still exciting. And that's probably the best part of this episode, in my eyes. We are now over 15 minutes into the video, and already we are at episode 7, James and the Queen of Sodor, which does have a couple callbacks. Gordon gets covered in mud, which is a callback to Trouble with Mud, where James gets covered in mud. And even though Gordon was dirty in that episode, and he didn't really care about the cleanliness of his paint job, I do like that they revert back to that. And the devious side that we see to Gordon is a callback to Thomas and Gordon and Percy and the Signal. And James's boastful about his paint job side is also a callback to No Joke for James, also from Season 3. And one more thing that combines almost a lot of the rest of the callbacks. I didn't mean to stutter there. So, the rest of the callbacks I'm going to say in one statement. James crashing into a sludge pipe is a reference to dirty objects, where, unlike that episode, he doesn't get dirty in the incident. That's actually quite surprising, considering how many times James has been in a crash and he's always gotten dirty afterwards. But I like that this was a change of pace. And also, it's another one of those typical James takes a train and it goes wrong. Just like Thomas and the Breakdown Train and all his trilogy episodes in that season, James in the Trouble with Trees, etc., etc. We come back to the narrow gauge railway with the Refreshment Lady's Tea Shop, which surprisingly only calls back to 3 episodes. 1 from Season 4 and 2 from Season 5, which is pretty nice. I like episodes that call back to Seasons 4 and 5. Even Season 3, I still like it. But yeah, the refreshment lady comes back again, and to be honest, that's really nice. The Peter, Sam, and the Refreshment Lady dynamic is still on display here, as Peter Sam tries to look for a good place for the Refreshment Lady to set up a tea shop. And I feel this is a callback to Peter Sam and the Refreshment Lady, for when Peter Sam still felt guilty about leaving the Refreshment Lady behind. But in her eyes, there is no hard feelings. She knows it was just an accident. But that's only one Season 4 episode. It also calls back to 2 Season 5 episodes, those being Make Someone Happy and Thomas, Percy, and Old Slow Coach. Even though the plot is actually way similar to Thomas, Percy, and Old Slow Coach, because, well, there is an old coach featured in this episode, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, the next episode references the same amount of episodes as the last one. The plot is also similar. The plot is similar to Percy, James, and the Fruitful Day, which is probably called back again. Which is very surprising. And Thomas is well into his Thomas and Trevor persona, per se. because, well, Thomas doesn't like Arthur after he just rejected to shunt trucks with them and be a naughty engine. I mean, yeah, that does make sense. He's trying to be a really useful engine, technically. And this episode, for some reason, gives me vibes of Harvey to the rescue. What? Now, on to Toby's windmill. Now, there are quite a lot of references in this episode, but not that much. Well, aside from many stock footages, this is honestly, I mean, kind of a fine episode, but all at the same time actually quite good. Anyways, let's get to pointing out the references. So in the storm sequence, I think that gave Toby and the flood flashbacks, I think. And Toby chuffing through the forest the next day actually kind of reminds me of Toby's discovery, where he does the same thing. Hence why he's going through the forest to look at the damage that the storm caused, especially on his windmill, obviously. Toby taking the wooden tree to the miller, I guess you can argue, is a callback to Time for Trouble when James pushed Toby to the station. Now that's a nice callback, even though it really wasn't intentional. Toby worrying about the miller's windmill shutting down is a callback to Toby and the Stout Gentleman on a hard lorry, where he worries his tramway will be taken over, obviously. It also surprisingly calls back to Toby Had a Little Lamb and Thomas in Trouble, where Toby actually helps the miller get his windmill working again, just like he helped Farmer McColl find his sheep. In fact, it'll be called back again later, I think. And 2, it actually calls back to Thomas in Trouble because, well, it actually kind of feels like the miller was in trouble of losing his windmill, but thankfully it is restored. And now it can still live in peace today. Now, Bad Day at Castle Loch is pretty much an underrated episode in my opinion. But anyways, let's get to the references. Donald and Douglas bickering and arguing about the monster, you could say, is a callback to Twin Trouble, where Donald and Douglas basically argue throughout the entirety of that episode. Well, basically. The brake van falling over is a callback to Brake Van, where Donald and Douglas had a bit of a trouble with a brake van. You can also say it calls back to Ghost Train because, well, they actually use the breakdown train as dinosaurs, kind of like. And they actually did that, and I'm not kidding. They actually did that in Ghost Train. I'm not kidding. Go watch for yourself, and then come back to this one, and you'll get the reference, which is actually kind of clever, to be honest. Also, you can argue, I guess, that Percy not wanting to go to Castle Loch pretty much means a callback to Thomas, Percy, and the Dragon, where he got spooked by a dragon at night, and I don't think he wants to be stuck there at night. And we know how scared Percy is with monsters. Well, that trope continues into Tale of the Brave, obviously. Anyways, let's move on. Rheneas and the roller coaster. This one has quite a few references, so let's go over them. So, first of all, Rheneas is worried to take the children on a trip around the railway, which is pretty odd. But later in the episode, we see him grumbling like an asshole. Like, literally, I'm not joking. He actually grumbles like an asshole throughout the entire episode. Well, not the entire episode, just a big portion of it. And that's how Sir Handel behaves. Like, from Steamroller and Bad Day for Sir Handel. I'm not joking. And you could say Rusty mending the tracks is a callback to Special Funnel, I guess. And officially, this is the second Rheneas episode of the entire show. The last time we got an episode with him was like Gallant Old Engine or something. Okay. And also the runaway sequence is poorly set up, which is actually meant to be a callback to Thomas, which is probably meant to be giving the laughing vibes of Thomas and the Jet Engine, because, well, it obviously has the William Tell Overture runaway theme again, but, I mean, okay, just bending my own rules. But you know what? I don't care. The William Tell Overture comes back, and that's really nice to see. But I don't like how short the runaway is. It just feels a bit rushed, if I'm being honest. Really. Surprisingly enough, Salty Stormy Tale actually references the episode that we just said in the previous one, and that being Gallant Old Engine. I'm not kidding. Okay, let's just go through them. Just like all the other episodes, just like a lot of the Storm episodes, this is another Storm episode. Just like Edward's Exploit and Percy's Promise, and, as I said earlier, Gallant Old Engine. And also, this actually feels like an illustration of what we could see in Salty's Stormy Tale. No pun intended. Like, this actually reminds me of No Sleep for Cranky when Salty told the tale of the brave little ship. Yeah, or whatever the heck he said there. I find that kind of interesting, and the emergency actually feels like like from Cranky Bugs, where like the ship can't hit the dock, but this time it's the ship must not hit the rocks. Like, that is so clever. That's clever to do. Even with that said, this episode is just fine. The middle of the road, if you will. Ah, Snow Engine. Let's see what references are under its belt. So basically, Oliver's character actually kind of reminds me of Oliver Owns Up, and I guess Bulgy? Wait, no, that's going to be referenced later on, but I don't think it's technically referenced in this episode. And apparently, Oliver and Toad each have a little arc. Apparently. So, Oliver goes from hating snow to liking it, and Toad's is the exact opposite. I find this kind of a reference to Busy Going Backwards and Oliver's Find. And in fact, this episode actually feels like a Season 5 episode. Cause like, it's another Oliver and Toad switch their minds on what to do, on what they think of something, I guess. I don't know. And I do like that the crew decided to give them their own little arc. Like, the last time they got a story was like Season 5, obviously. This episode also kind of reminds me of Jack Frost, because once Oliver gets stuck in the snow, it mentions that icicles are on his funnel. And, I mean, I think Percy had icicles on his funnel. Just like he had icicles on his nose. Oh, that's nice that they made a callback to that. And also, the crash actually feels kind of similar to a close shave. And snow, if you will, because lots of snow falls down. A bit on top of him, and a bit, and the head actually falls right next to him. Very funny. And you could say those icy rails sure gave Oliver some bad luck, right? Huh, just like how the wheels were actually sandy in Toad Stands By, he was actually able to pull, but this time he actually wants to stop. And so he fails to do that. And actually manages to make the snowman fall apart, just like he pulled Scruffy apart. Huh. Kind of very clever. Okay, I'm not gonna be joking when I say this. Something Fishy basically has a lot of references too. Like Percy Gets It Right, it doesn't have as much as Percy Gets It Right, but it has a lot of references. Up to like 11 or 12 or something. I don't know how much exactly. Arthur's love for the sea, for starters, is actually a callback to All at Sea when Duck starting to like the sea. A lot more than I imagined, I guess. Or a lot more than he imagined, maybe. That makes me wonder, is Arthur really Duck? Or something? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know if that's true, but that's just a thought, because we see Duck literally right there. There are also a few references in the crash sequence, too. Like, when Thomas falls off the pier, he literally commits both World's Strongest Engine and Special Attraction. And also commits Trust Thomas and Special Letter. Wow. Wonderful. And I like that Thomas's hatred of fish comes back. Like, we've seen that since, like, Thomas Goes Fishing and Fish or something. I don't know. It also reminds me of Thomas Comes to Breakfast, hence how Thomas got bushes or seaweed all over him. Huh. Kinda reminds me of Thomas Comes to Breakfast, if you will. The crash is also similar, I forgot to mention, to Something in the Air, The Flying Kipper, and Thomas in the Trucks, because maybe Thomas has crashed into buffers again, I guess. Also, Arthur's arc kind of reminds me of Duck's arc from Season 3 in Donald's Duck, I guess you could say. Because the entire episode is also focused on the seaside parts. And you can argue it's also the dock side too, I guess. Well, it doesn't technically focus on the dock side, it's more of a seaside episode. Kind of like Donald's Duck and all that stuff. Not to mention, Thomas is still in his Thompson Trevor, kind of arc, I guess. Well, technically not an arc, more of a persona, if you will. And here we are to one of the greatest episodes of the season, the Runaway Elephant. There are lots of callbacks, there are some callbacks in this episode too, so let's go over them. It's nice that we get a story around an engine and an elephant again, kinda like Henry and the Elephant, if you will. Duncan is still in his impatient side from faulty whistles and Duncan especially. And he's also in his kind of rock and roll and passengers and polish attitude side as well. And the runaway kind of gives me busy going backwards vibes because he first passes a crossing, he passes another one where he nearly rams into a tractor, kind of like that near collision Toad had with James. And finally, he races past Rusty, kind of like how Toad passes Henry very fast. And then the elephant careers into the air and into a lake. Kind of like how Toad fell into a muddy pond in the episode. Alright, let's keep going with peace and quiet. Huh, get it? Keep going with peace and quiet? Alright, I'll stop at the pun. Alright, our first reference occurs in the opening shot. So, we get, after the shot of Thomas and other engines pushing and pulling trains, we get this panning shot of Murdoch. Now, in my eyes, this is actually a callback to Daisy, where they actually used a panning shot for her debut. And I found that kind of interesting, because, well, Murdoch actually reminds me of Daisy. I mean, he's basically a steamy version, or a steamy male version of Daisy. Well, those references continue into Murdoch's episode. But the only difference between Murdoch and Daisy is that Murdoch ain't lazy. He's just a gentle giant that likes it quiet. And to be honest, that's really it in terms of his personality, surprisingly. Murdoch comes across some sheep, just like how Daisy came across a bull in Bullseye's. Yeah. Also kind of reminds me of Bob because, well, instead of just seeing one sheep, they meet clones of them. Wow. And in true Toby fashion, whenever an engine comes across an animal, he actually comes to the rescue to help, just like he helped out Daisy in Bullseye's. So that's all the callbacks to this episode. I can't believe I spot these few references. Like, well, obviously, Murdoch is basically a steamy male version of Daisy from, like, the Season 2 episodes. Daisy and Percy's Predicament. Salty and Harvey are like Percy and Toby. And Murdoch is like, well, as I said, Daisy. The only difference being that he's male. And he's a steam engine. And at least he's not lazy. He's just a gentle giant, as I said earlier, who likes peace and quiet. Hence the title. Peace and quiet. And what's more shocking is that Percy and Toby are present in the episode. Even though Salty and Harvey actually kind of represent Toby and Percy. Well, I know I said that many times already, but let's just... Okay, I'm sorry if I'm going over a bit too much. Let's just keep going. Fergus Breaks the Rules calls back to most of the Diesel episodes. Why do I say most of the Diesel episodes? Because one is already referenced like 3 episodes ago. Like, you know, something fishy. Yeah. When I was talking about most of the Diesel episodes, I was talking about Diesel does it again, Pop goes to Diesel, and dirty work. I think there was more. I could have sworn there was more. Fergus getting lost after being spooked at the ironworks is a callback to Scaredy Engines. Same with Thomas's fear in the dark. I guess you can argue is also a callback to Ghost Train. But you know what? I'm not going to count it. Probably not. And I'm happy to say Ari and Bert are back in their scary era from Season 5's Stepney Gets Lost. Because they basically spook Fergus and he leaves the ironworks and actually gets lost. What a surprising callback, using an episode from the 5th season and actually doing it in reverse to make a callback to a previous season's episode. I actually find that kind of clever, to be honest. And I guess you could say Diesel basically behaves bowled out style, I guess. And directly after that, the next episode references only surprisingly one episode. One, because it's a sequel story to a previous Season 3 episode. And that being Bulgy. Bulgy rides again, wins the record for smallest amount of references in the entire season. Let's go high in the sky with Harold the Helicopter in Harold and the Flying Horse. I'm very happy to see that the Percy and Harold rivalry is still up and well from Percy and Harold, and a bad day for Harold. Speaking of that episode, the scene where Harold helps out Pegasus after Thomas loads the cart, after Thomas's crew loads the cart, actually kind of reminds me of a bad day for Harold, because, well, there's an engine basically stuck in a ditch, which actually kind of reminds me of Off the Rails, but that will be referenced another 2 episodes after. And I guess you can also argue that Thomas helping Harold out and possibly cheering him up, I guess you could say, is a callback to maybe the Runaway, where Harold helps out Thomas, and now Thomas is helping Harold. And I guess you could say it feels very Thomas and the Rumors-esque, where Thomas worries about Harold, I think. I don't know. I don't know if it's I might be wrong on that, but still. It feels very Season 5-esque. And also the scene where Harold flies over Rusty, it actually kind of reminds me of the episode Trucks, where Rusty and Harold had a discussion about their day's work, I guess you could say. Even though they don't have any dialogue in the scene, I'd like to think that they both said hello to each other. Even though it was said, well, it wasn't really told to us that they said it. Heading back to everyone's favorite Scarloy Railway with the grand opening of the new branch line. Get it? Yep, get it. It's an episode pun. This is technically a Scarloy episode, technically, but it's also meant to be a Season 5 type of episode. And also the red balloon is back. Yay. Topham and Lindy Hat messing up their hats is meant to be a callback to a scarf for Percy, where Topham also messes up his hat and suit, I guess. And the plot is also similar to Better Late Than Never, hence how the Fat Controller says Scarloy is late. Well, I know that can be a bit confusing, but still, I like how Scarloy was handled in this episode. He is handled brilliantly. But nonetheless, still a pretty mid-episode. Thank God we are almost there. Just 5 more episodes to cover, with Best Dressed Engine being the next one. Gordon's arrogance to be decorated is obviously a callback to Trouble with Mud, where Gordon doesn't want to be clean for some reason. I'm happy that they fixed this. This was a really clever idea. Also, it's another one of those, Gordon is pompous, he pays the price for it. Examples include well, not best dressed engine. A better view for Gordon. Note how the banner is stuck on his smoke box. But other examples include off the rails, wrong road, Gordon takes a tumble, etc, etc. And also, you know, like Gordon takes charge. Not Gordon takes charge, that's a season 8 episode. I meant to say Duck takes charge because Gordon was one of the big engines who actually paid the price for being so arrogant and into teasing Duck. I also forgot to mention cows. I think I already said that. But anyways, Gordon smashing into Trevor's apple cart might be a callback to Twin Trouble and Ghost Train. Surprising how Ghost Train is referenced, and so is Trouble with Mud. They're both referenced once again. Very nice. On to the next one. And we have now arrived at everyone's favorite episode of the season, Gordon and Spencer. In this scene where Thomas and Gordon are talking about being cleaned, or the Duke and Duchess of Boxford or whatever, this actually feels like season 1. Notice how the plot is actually similar to Down the Mine. Kinda like that argument that Thomas and Gordon had in that scene. This scene of Thomas and Gordon while Spencer racing past is a callback to Gordon and the Gremlin. Notice how they're in the same exact positions. Also a callback to Gordon and the Famous Visitor, and possibly Tender Engines, of course, because, well, Gordon is possibly in his famous engine jealousy side. The episode once again references Thomas and Gordon, Edward the Very Useful Engine, and Paint Pots and Queens. Note how Gordon is in his big brother side. He pulls Spencer instead of pushing him. And yeah, the hill rescue was similar to Edward the Really Useful Engine as well, basically. And we arrive at possibly my least favorite classic series episode, Not So Hasty Puddings, which is basically another Thomas and Elizabeth rivalry story. And to be honest, I didn't care for Elizabeth that much in this episode, or the season 6 episode, which is the obvious reference to this episode. Well, it's the obvious reference in this episode, I meant to say. But not only does it feel like it's only snow, but it also references all the other Christmas episodes. You know, like Thomas and Percy's Christmas Adventure, Thomas, Terrence in the Snow, what else? Thomas's Christmas Party, Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree. Yeah. And you can also say, I guess it also references not snow and the Deputation, I guess, because, well, an engine is rescuing a character is rescuing a character from the snow, I guess you could say. And we now reach our last narrow gauge episode of the classic era, Trusty Rusty, haha. Get it? Because, well, it's an instant meme in my friend group, obviously. This episode follows up the plot of Rock and Roll. Well, that's pretty obvious because, well, I thought Duncan was supposed to respect Rusty by now, but it's just seeming like that he's gone back to his old ways. Why are you doing that, Duncan? Rusty being worried about the bridge is a callback to Rusty and the Boulder, where Rusty was worried about the boulder running loose. Well, kinda like how it is in this episode where Rusty worries about the bridge collapsing. Kinda neat. Also, surprisingly, Rusty rescues, once again, a yellow character. Like Rusty to the rescue and Rusty Saves the Day, where in Rusty Saves the Day, he saves the railway, not a character. Well, technically, he does save a character from basically a railway's doom, I guess. Or he saves almost pretty much every character on the Scarlet Railway by season 6. I guess, maybe. I don't know. And surprisingly enough, when it comes to Rusty to the rescue, Rusty is once again rescuing a yellow character. Because, well, Rusty rescues Stepney, who is also a yellow character. And in this season, he's now rescuing Duncan like he did in Rock and Roll and Rusty to the Rescue, obviously. And now we are at the final episode of the classic era, 3 cheers for Thomas, which only calls back to 2 episodes, but that seems to be normal. This episode feels very Train Stops Play-esque. Note how they used the cricket field building again from Season 4, and there is a sport event going on. Huh, very, very nice. And one of the last references in the season is Thomas and Bertie's rivalry. I like that they brought this up again. Like, the last time they interacted was, like, Season 3, I guess. Well, technically, Bertie's speaking role last time he spoke was, aside from this season, maybe Season 6 and Harvey to the Rescue, maybe? Yeah, he had, I think he only had, 3 or 4 lines of dialogue, which tends to be normal for a secondary character. But anyways, talking about the Thomas and Bertie rivalry, it hasn't been used since, Season 3. Gosh, it's been a while. Wow. Thomas and Bertie both race all the way to the sports field halt, but Thomas instead gives it up to help the children in need, allowing Bertie to take the win. This is such a very clever story arc, since Thomas started out as a cheeky, rude, and naive fusspot, or an impertinent scallywag, if you like to be like Duke, all the way up to a very kind, mature engine that he changed into from Season 5. And thankfully, this has to be one of the best moments of Season 7 ever seen before, in my opinion.
You were very helpful at Sports Day. So we thought you should have a medal of your own, added the boy. My very own medal, said Thomas. Thank you.
3 cheers for Thomas, the #1 engine. But I still won the race, tooted Bertie.
Thomas just peeped happily.
That was a lot of references. I'm not joking. This season, after I checked through everything, it references almost pretty much every single episode from Seasons 1 through 6. I'm not joking. I actually had a checklist with me the whole time to check if I counted every reference. And what did I count? All of them. All of the frickin' episodes from the previous 6 seasons. I counted them all, and they are all referenced, in terms of reminders, and in terms of official references. Now, if you want to point out your references, tell me in the comments below. I'd like to hear what you found in this season. If you don't know how to look on references, then this video is recommendation, because I can point out every single episode reference. Let me tell you, I found every single reference in this season. And before I go, I will leave you all this little montage of lots of the Season 7 footage, just as a little tribute to the classic era. Sit back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy. Bye.